So Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, bro. So, I guess right off the bat, like for folks that don't know who you are and what you're about, you own and ran a big UGL. Can you tell people about that? What was that like and what got you into that business? And let's just start there.
Yeah. So I guess it started when I was younger. I was always picked on because I was really small and immature and developed. Like I now know that I had low testosterone my whole life, but back then no doctor would even check somebody's testosterone level when they were teens or in their 20s, just because the prevailing theory was that there's no way anybody in their 20s could have low testosterone. So
that's probably still the prevailing theory, which is wrong.
Yeah, it's getting better, but there's still a lot of stigma. There's still a lot of education that is necessary.
Yeah.
So I got picked on. I was so skinny that I got picked on for being skinny. So I just started lifting weights at like 13, and I never looked back. Even though I started lifting weights pretty heavily, I was still smaller than everyone else. It took me twice the amount of work to see half the results of my peers. Everybody around me could just, get in the gym for, again, half the effort and have twice the results that I had. Yeah. Consequently, I wasn't super respected. I let people walk on me. I was kind of like, I always wanted to please people, and I was not confident. One day in my early 20s, I started taking testosterone, and it absolutely completely improved my quality of life. Like two different worlds, like dramatic. It was a dramatic change. I finally put on the size for my work ethic. I put on about 32 pounds and 100 pounds on my bench in 5 weeks. When I started, it was just a small amount. I was just doing like 1 milliliter of Sustanon a week.
Okay.
And like 10 milligrams of D-ball a day.
All right. A day.
And I did that for like 5 weeks and put 100 pounds on my bench. It was like, I hyper responded.
Yeah.
Like,
obviously. Jesus. Yeah, I know what you mean when you go from even natural to super physiologic levels of test, or I mean, if you're natural at 700 and then, you get on TRT and you're on some sort of low dose protocol and you end up at 950, but you're steady state 950 or consistently at 950. I mean, it's a world of difference. Start crossing over into 13, 14, 1500. I mean, dude, recently, I transitioned from cream and Proviron to just cream and like 50 milligrams of prop every third day or so. I'm just kind of in between protocols. The cream and Proviron was really causing me a lot of shedding. And, I measured my total testosterone, and basically the peak of the prop, as well as the day of the cream. And I'm at 3,200 nanograms per deciliter. I looked at it and I was like, what the fuck? There's no way, it's that high. And I saw your, I'm sorry to interrupt. I saw your post. Was that your blood work on your last post? Oh, that was your blood work. Okay. Yeah, that's my blood work. Blood work. Yeah. I mean, so I'm transitioning off of cream and just going to run prop. I'm just kind of trying to see at this point, like how long I can tolerate, that level of testosterone. But I mean, big fucking difference in everything. I do runs every day, 3-mile runs. Like my cardio is better with 3,000 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone than it ever was at 1,200. I'm stronger in the gym and all that. But what I was getting around to saying is it's just the more you go up, or if you get to a level that you're not used to, dude, it's transformative. Energy and strength and confidence and all that. So I fully understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I just turned into a different person. So now I looked like my work ethic in the gym, and people just started treating me different. Like the most amazing thing was all of a sudden everybody wanted to be my friend now, and people respected me. And like when I'd walk into a bar, heads would turn and the crowd would part in front of me when I walked through. At the time I was in college and I was a plumber just in the summers, and I hated it. I hated the job. I wasn't good at it. I was terrible. Yeah. And now, and I went in and my boss just suddenly gave me a raise just because I stood before him looking stout. Yeah. Now, just because of my physical transformation. There's no other reason for it. I was a terrible employee.
Right.
But the whole world changed. It was like living two different lives. I lived two different lives, one before testosterone and one after. And not the confidence, the energy, the sense of well-being, just a completely different world. So I happened to be in college for biochemistry at the time.
Right.
I was always adept at the sciences. So I had to figure out, why do I feel this good? Like, what is this? What is going on here? So I just started, not only did I tailor my degree to the study of hormones and while I was in college, but I just started reading voraciously. I consumed every bit of knowledge I could. I read every single forum, and I just couldn't stop. I would just sit there in front of the computer, and I bought the Llewellyn Anabolics book, and I read that cover to cover. And then, so, pretty soon I just really started understanding all these things. And I started to help other people like I was helped. And, not only did people start to come to me in the gym or just in life and be like, how do you, like, you look completely different. Like, how did you do this? Like, what's going on? Yeah. And I would just start to help people. And then after a while, like, people really started to come to me. So I kind of figured, well, I have to monetize this.
Yeah.
So I started just breaking down supply chains and figuring out, best prices, best way to help people, through the black market. Right. And I was able, I was able to start, over time, over a relatively short period of time, just becoming, one of the bigger dealers in my city. And I lived in a small city. Mm-hmm. So, I did that for a while. And again, after helping people, one day, one of my clients, at this time I was just reselling other stuff. That's right. So I found this really good source from China.
Yeah. Right.
With the stuff was just dirt cheap.
So you were getting what, raws and then make.
I did that later, but at this time I wasn't. I was just getting finished products.
Okay.
But I found this really good source from China that had really, really good prices. Yeah. And they also, it was kind of funny. Like, some of the people may remember, it was called International Pharmaceuticals, or IP China. Okay. It was a pretty big, they supplied like a lot of the world. They had really, really good price stuff, and their stuff was good. It was really potent. Yeah. And this was around the time that British Dragon. So, I think it's important to understand the zeitgeist at the time. Right. Yeah. So, at the time in the early 2000s, there was no UGLs, right? I mean, there was only the big names.
Yeah. Okay.
And nobody trusted a UGL because fakes were such a major problem. Like, the younger guys don't understand how hard it used to be to get testosterone. It was really hard. Right. And fakes were rampant because nobody knew how to make, there's no UGLs. Nobody knew how to make their own. Mm-hmm. So there was a huge fake market. So people were so scared of getting fakes that if you go, they would only buy, there was only there was like 5, I don't know. There's probably under 10 labs, right? Like, British Dragon was one of them, British Dispensary. Remember the Dencal, Quality Vet. Remember all these? I don't know if you remember those.
No, I definitely don't. No, I don't.
Okay. There was only 6 to 10 labels that people would accept. Yeah. Yeah. And if you had anything else, people would just scream fake, and nobody would accept anything else. There was these, 6 to 10 brands, or that's it. Yeah. So British Dragon was one of the biggest labs in the world and one of the biggest labels in the world. And they had good stuff. Well, they got busted in 2008 and they went under. But the IP China guys just started making British Dragon labels and slapping them on products and then selling them. So the British Dragon label kind of continued, and a lot of people knew that this was IP China just revitalizing the British Dragon name, but it was still good stuff, so nobody cared.
Nobody cared.
So,
yeah, interesting. Wow.
So I was with this company, or with this supplier prior to them having the British Dragon, slapping British Dragon labels on. And once they did that, now I had this really good priced supplier with a really high name brand product that everybody recognized.
Yeah.
So so I could, I could sell these at a good price and everybody recognized the British Dragon label. Everybody was happy. And I had been with these guys long enough that I really brought my prices down. Like I talked them down in price. So I was paying unheard of prices at the time.
Yeah.
So I could make a decent profit margin too. So one day, one of my clients said that he told me about online sales. And he said, there's this board, this supplying forum where you can go and there's all these suppliers and, you could probably do pretty well there. You should check it out. So naturally I just went there and I started looking into it and I noticed all the other suppliers, like I could compete with the prices and still make a profit.
Huh. Interesting.
So, I mean, it was an arduous process. It's not easy just to say, okay, I'm going to be an online supplier. I had to do a lot. It was an arduous process, but eventually I did become an online supplier. And the funny thing was that when I first started online, like I was just hoping, because again, I didn't make much money. I wasn't making a lot of money in my small city from sales. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was like, I was pretty destitute. And I was hoping that I could make $200 or $300 extra bucks a week.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like if I could do that, I would be comfortable and things would be better. And I thought that was overzealous. Right? I thought that was probably too much. Huh. I didn't think there's any way I could make that.
Right.
When I opened this, now granted, there was a lot of work I had to do and there's some key moves that I made. And getting into some of those key moves, I think, is the more interesting story. Like, how did I become one of the biggest in the country?
Right. Yeah, because you went from basically selling test or whatever to local people and making a couple $100 week or whatever to like substantial. Yeah. I mean, how much revenue did you ultimately end up doing when So when I finally opened up online, like again, I was hoping for 200 to 300. I thought that was too much. I didn't think that I was going to do that. Within 6 months, I was bringing in probably 24,000 a week. Wow.
It just blew up. It just absolutely blew up. Yeah. And that, and by the end, we were doing 100 to 200,000 a week.
A week.
Okay,
sales. So that's many millions of dollars a year.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't keep accounting. So I don't know exactly how much I made, but it was probably like 20 to 25 million total.
Jesus Christ, man. So just out of curiosity, did you put that money into stocks and did you invest the money? Is that money gone?
I get that a lot. No, so I had houses.
Yeah.
The houses I actually used for revenue and I was actually able to kind of make some of the money look legit because I could buy these houses for really cheap and then pay cash to fix them up into something that was worth quite a bit of money. And then, but then I would just rent them. I had houses. I went on a lot of elaborate vacations. When I got arrested, I had a lot of money seized. Yeah. I didn't do the typical thing where I just buried money, which a lot of people have commented on how stupid I was for not putting money away, but I didn't put much away, so I didn't have a lot. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't have a lot. And mind you, I had like 12 employees, so a lot of that money I had to pay all these employees as well. But yeah, it just absolutely blew up, and it was absolutely a shock. Like I never dreamed. Like I remember at one point in the beginning, I never dreamed I would had that much money. At one point I had like $100,000 cash at my house. Yeah. And I got terrified. I got scared. Just because I'm like, okay, this is too big. I'm going to get caught. Like, this is crazy. This just turned into something I totally didn't expect it to turn into.
So there was like a task force that ultimately ended up being put together to target you, right? I mean, how do you think that they got word of you? How did that come about?
Yeah. So to get into that, let me tell you about how the operation worked, and then I can tell you about how things went awry.
All right.
So I had everything compartmentalized. Yeah. The idea was that we're going to have these positions, shipping, chemists, people actually making the product, and receivers, people who received money, and and shipments of the testosterone coming from China, right? Because we were getting like 10 kilos in a week. So I had all these positions, and they were all compartmentalized, meaning that nobody knew each other. And the idea was that if one part of the operation got busted in one state, and I also spread it out throughout the country so that it wasn't localized.
Right.
If everything is localized in one spot and it gets busted, the whole thing just crumbles right there. But if I spread it out to different states, compartmentalize it so nobody knows each other, so they can't tell on each other even if they wanted to.
Right.
A bust isn't necessarily bring down everything. So I had chemists in one state, and they would ship the finished product to a shipper in another state.
Okay.
So one of the mistakes I made here was I had the receiver was one of the shippers, so they had product at their house. And this I changed this after this happened, but
right.
So one time, and we used to just wrap these things up, and it used to be vacuum sealed with a ton of bubble tape or bubble wrap around it, and then we'd ship like 300 vials, or like I think 100 vials a box.
Okay.
Right. So, and in this particular instance, we were shipping 3 boxes and 100 vials each box. Now I had the 20 milliliter vials. That was another one of the differences, subtle differences that kind of made my company stand out, is I had 20 milliliter vials instead of the classic 10.
Right. Huh.
So it was like 300 20 milliliter vials, and we were shipping them, and one of them, they must have destroyed this package because one of them broke and leaked through the package.
Okay.
Now the USPS usually doesn't open packages, but if something leaks through, they're allowed to make sure that it's not hazardous.
Yeah.
So they were able to open it. Once they saw what was in there, they sent the DEA to the address that it was going to. Now, mind you, at this time, though, nobody has possessed anything. So there's actually nothing that they can do. But they did send DEA to the house, to the address it was going to. And that address it was a shipper's house. So they had some steroids and packing materials and things there. Yeah. So now I sent somebody, the post office actually called and said, hey, we're going to open this package because it's leaking.
Yeah.
And they were trying to say, no, don't open it. We'll come get it. Yeah. And they opened it. And I sent somebody else to the house to try to clean this house out before anybody showed up. And they almost made it, but they didn't. There was still some stuff there when the DEA got there. I had a personal assistant, and this personal assistant I didn't tell her what I was doing, but she started to catch wind just because of all the stuff going on around her. So she actually eventually wanted into the business because she saw how much money they were making too. And so I said, okay, I'll give you an opportunity. I'll let you be a shipper. And they just, when the DEA came, they scared her. They told her, the typical thing, you're going to get all this time. They just scared the crap out of her, and she just blew everything in she knew. Now, like I said, most people were compartmentalized and they didn't know much, but this girl happened to be a personal assistant of mine. So she knew things that other people wouldn't, just because she had been in a different role. So she just blew in everything that she knew.
Yeah.
Now, they still didn't. But those still people are just arrested, and I lived in a different state, and so did everybody else. Those are the only 2 people in that state. Mm-hmm. So at this point, it's still a local thing. And I got the other person. He shut his mouth, and I got a lawyer for him.
Yeah.
And through that lawyer, we were monitoring what was going on. And, obviously we shut down the operation at that time. We were monitoring what was going on. And their lawyer said, it looks like the feds aren't going to pick this up. So it's just a local case. Mm-hmm. Both of those got low-level felonies. Nobody spent a day in jail. They were going to be, you can get what's called an ACDC, where in 6 months of good behavior, they dropped the felony.
Interesting.
So there was actually no long-term consequences coming.
Right.
So we were just like, okay. And then all the guys called me and we're just like, let's get going again. We'll just stay out of that state. It's, it's not going to go any further. So we kept going, and it got bigger, and I added more shippers, and things got things got bigger and better.
Right.
It turned out down the road that the feds did that. There was a task force called Operation Cyber Juice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they weren't it because it was only 300 vials. They actually weren't going to pick it up, but they eventually just decided to. And the postmaster actually came to me and said that he was the one who pushed to get that picked up. I don't know why he had a hard on for me, but he did. And so he pushed to get it picked up by Operation Cyber Juice, and so they eventually picked it up, and it took them 2 more years to catch us.
Okay, interesting. So what happens? They just show up one day at your place, and they're like, "Yeah,
so I lived in
it's over."
I lived in a penthouse overlooking Manhattan at the time, and I get this knock on the door at like 5 a.m. There's a pound on the door, and I get up and I'm mad because I'm like, who's knocking on my door at 5 a.m?
Right. Yeah, grab your gun.
But I just went out there, I threw a shirt on, my dogs are barking. My girlfriend had gone out before me, and I was still throwing a shirt on. I couldn't believe I was hearing this pounding. Yeah. So she comes back and she's like, I can't see through the peephole. They have it blocked. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to go show this person. You don't pound on my door at 5 a.m. So I go over there and I just whip the door open. And it's like this long line of DEA with vests on and guns pointed at my head. Yeah. M4s, M16s for sure. That's how it is. They're all lined up. Yeah. Oh shit. And so that was it, huh? Wow. So, we were talking about before we jumped on here in prison, in jail, you developed a plan to build this clinic. We'll talk about the clinic later, but I guess just briefly touch on, how you transition into you're doing UGL, the biggest UGL, one of the biggest UGLs, you're selling, various anabolic steroids to people, you get busted. Then in prison, you're in jail, you're like, I still want to work with hormones because you studied it in college. Like, it's totally your thing. You're into it. It changed your life. And why did you decide a clinic? Yeah. So after I was indicted, I didn't spend any time in jail right away. Okay. I was indicted and released. And it still took 2 years for all the court proceedings to go. Wow. In retrospect, I wish I would have gone just right in, because then I would have been out 2 years earlier. Yeah. But but it took 2 years. So in that 2 years, I actually opened a supplement company, and I almost made it on Shark Tank. Huh. So I had this supplement company. I had to close it down just because I went into prison. And so I was actually looking to do that, to reopen that when I got out. And I was, because I was nonviolent, I was in what's called white collar prisons. Yep. Not that there aren't, there's still a lot of people who had done 10, 20 years, in there. Yeah. There's a lot of nonviolent drug offenders there too, but there's also a lot of white collar criminals. Okay. And a lot of them are big businessmen with, $100 million or $1 billion cases, right? Yeah. And some of them were really brilliant businessmen. So I was just kind of running them past some of them. And one time, one of them started to ask, well, what I did, and I started to, I was telling them about how much I know and understand, and I, as much as I think supplements are sort of important, like what really works, what really changes people's lives are these hormones. Yeah. And I started to kind of talk about my passion for that. And they're like, well, is there a way to legally do this? Yeah. I was like, well, yeah, there's TRT clinics. Yeah. And the person was like, well, why didn't you do that? And then it just hit me. I didn't even think about it. I don't even know why I didn't think about it. And I'm just like, I started to like, oh my God, because I had read articles about where people who had felonies were able to still be part of TRT clinics. There's a way to do it. Okay, interesting. So I started thinking about, oh my God, there is a way to do this. And so I just started researching it and looking into it. And I wrote a business plan and went over it with some of these business professionals. Yeah. And just lined it up. And then when I got out, I studied, I took like 6 months straight, and I had a lot of legal experience when I was in prison. I fought my case, and I helped a lot of people fight their cases. I studied the law in relation to this industry. The regulatory environment is pretty confusing. Studied it enough to understand it in depth. Yeah. And then I was able to just execute the business plan.
no one would think in that case that you could start a TRT clinic for fucking sure. That's probably why it didn't cross your mind, because you're like, there's no way that that's going to work, you know, but you ended up doing it, which is commendable, bro. I mean, that's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So on that topic, let's segue into what I think a lot of people really want to hear regarding TRT. We're just going to talk about TRT and you know, everything that constitutes TRT, because, you know, it isn't as simple as getting on testosterone and then suddenly all the issues that you're getting on testosterone for are solved, whether it's libido, sexual function, erectile function, energy, sleep, or whatever. And I think that, you know, clinics or maybe it's a combination of clinics and the forums sort of oversimplify testosterone as if like it's as easy as here, you know, here's your 150 milligram injection, you split it up or do it however you want to do it, and then you can just ride off into the sunset. I mean, there's all these ancillary hormones. There are changes in hormones that you naturally produce that you produce ultimately a lot less of once you go on TRT, and you know, things like libido and erectile function are not as simple as testosterone. You can have fucking super high testosterone and even estradiol in a reasonable range and still have, you know, dick problems basically. So it's a lot more complicated. So I think the first topic I want to touch on, because this has been, you know, relevant to me and my client work, is DHEA and Pregnenolone. Can you speak on, at least from your perspective with your patients, as well as your own maybe personal history, what you think the importance or lack thereof of DHEA and Pregnenolone is on TRT?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to touch on a few things you said there. Like, I guess the first thing I'll say is like, yeah, kind of like we started to allude to, one of the reasons that I am so good at this is because I have so much experience. Like the time, you know, from when I was in my early 20s until, especially when I had the Underground Empire, I was guiding people through their protocols. Now, most of my clinics actually weren't like bodybuilders or people abusing it. It was people who were on TRT. Actually, a lot of them, most of them had TRT prescriptions, but they could get it 10 times cheaper from me. Right. So they would just come get it from me and run TRT protocols. So, and I guided people through that. I looked at blood work, I saw empirical data, and, you know, I must have guided 20,000 people through their protocols. I've just seen this on such a vast level. I can sit on my mountaintop and look down on all the empirical data I've aggregated over the decades, and I can just see things that other people can't. Right. And I, you know, because of the situation I was in, because of all the empirical data I've aggregated, I've seen this more than any physician, provider, urologist, endocrinologist. Yep. In an unregulated environment, which means that I've also studied how to use the derivatives, right? I've just seen it. I've seen it all, seen everything. And it just put me in a perfect position to come into, and I've always said this too, like the bodybuilding community is light years beyond the medical community when it comes to understanding exactly how to use all the derivatives, the pharmacokinetics of everything. Yep. It's, you know, and coming from that world into the medical community's world where they just don't study it. They don't learn about it. Yeah. Testosterone has been demonized. There's stigma. And because it became a controlled substance in the 1990 Steroid Control Act, it made it difficult, if not impossible, to research. Right. So there's just no data in the medical community. And, you know, I think it would be prudent for scientists and the medical community to actually look at the data from the bodybuilding community. There's tons of data out there. Yeah. And a real scientist.
Just to kind of interject, I mean, there's stuff that bodybuilders know, or people that have been on TRT for a while and have experimented like over the years that, you know, it would puzzle an endocrinologist. I mean, some endocrinologists, including one that I was going to for a while just to kind of run some ideas back and forth and get prescribed a particular medication. Like, I mean, that guy is still on the notion that, you know, 200 milligrams every 2 weeks or something is like what you should be doing, and suggests that, you know, if you're injecting prop or even sip every day, that you've got an increased chance of liver cancer and some of these things that they used to think, which you know, we just have no evidence of these days. And so I think that the lack of, like, I don't know, I mean, diving deep into and having to deal with patients that are on TRT and having to actually work with them through the short strokes of adjusting a protocol, the lack of that sort of stuff that the medical establishment has, it creates room for people like us. It creates room for hormone consultants that like are in the middle of it, because like you said, I mean, we get to learn the shit. that, you know, docs, frankly, it's not even their job. They're just too busy to learn. They're just engaged in all this other shit.
They don't learn about it in medical school. It's not a part of their curriculum.
Right.
It's just, it's not in their studies. Even endocrinologists, they don't study it. They admit it. I treat a lot of physicians and they admit we don't study this in medical school.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's just it's a bizarre thing. Like, I mean, it leaves room though for the medical establishment to essentially identify a group of specialized individuals that work with TRT, which would be wonderful. I mean, it would be really great for people out there on TRT. It's real specialized MDs, right? They just rarely exist.
Yeah, I mean, like a true scientist would take data no matter where it came from, and there is ample amounts of data out there.
Right.
And like, you know, I don't know. I always turn to, there was one study that came out, I don't even remember when it came out, but I remember reading it, and now like we joke about it sometimes, that there was a study that came out that its conclusion was that testosterone has no effect on muscle mass. It has no anabolic tendencies to it.
That's funny.
So you don't go to one bodybuilder. You don't ever look at the bodybuilding world and say, you know, I mean, it's just, just like you're saying, it's they haven't studied it, they haven't experienced it like some of us have, you know, outside of the medical community, and therefore, you know, what we see in the field, like what you can read about, like I always say, the scientific theory is important for kind of trying to understand things.
Yeah.
But by far the more important information is what we see in the field, the experience, the empirical data that we actually see. And
definitely. Yep. Yeah, you're right. You need to be able to separate those things. You know, there are people that strictly operate from the literature, and unfortunately, the literature doesn't always tell the appropriate picture. Like post-finasteride syndrome is a great example. Like there's a lot of literature that I think were probably influenced by Merck and some of the pharmaceutical companies around finasteride, where, you know, they attempt to make the case, and it kind of looks convincing that PFS doesn't exist. But like in the real world, I mean, there are dudes just like all manner of erectile, libido, neurological issues as a result of taking finasteride. And so it's just, you know, these small little myopic studies don't tell, you know, anything close to the whole picture. Yeah,
that's absolutely correct. So getting back into, coming back around to your question. The next thing I wanted to iterate is that, what I want to make clear to people is that most people do, you know, because we're talking about there is a subset of people who have problems, and there's a subset of people where it's not simple, and there is a long dialing in process, and it's not as easy as just giving testosterone. However, what I do want to make clear is most people are that way, where you just give them 150 to 200 milligrams of testosterone, they immediately dramatically improve their quality of life, and they're off and running with their dramatically improved quality of life, and they don't come back to the forums, you know. And so the problem that I just keep running into in these forums such as Reddit or Facebook is those forums are created to help people, right? They're help forums. They're where people come who have problems. So it's not an accurate subset of the population. Most people do take testosterone. They immediately dramatically improve their quality of life, and they just go live their improved quality of life. They don't come back to a help forum and say, well, everything's great. Well, see you later.
Yeah, I think a lot of them too, you know, are interestingly counter to what is typically suggested out there on the web. A lot of them are starting with like 150 to 200 milligrams, but injected less frequently, you know, twice a week, maybe once a week. And again, a lot of those guys that come to me, not for TRT, but like I've had them come to me for other stuff. Like we find out they're on TRT, they're doing fucking great. Like, because they didn't buy into, you know, micro injecting twice a day, you know, like in their belly fat, and not like that works for people and whatever. But like, again, tried and true traditional protocols also are very effective.
What you learn when you get good at this is that there is a massive disparity between the way each individual reacts to different compounds, different protocols, different blood levels, different everything. And the better you get at this, you're not looking for a cookie cutter solution, or you're not looking to get everybody on a specific protocol or a specific blood level. It's about developing a methodology to figure out what yields the best results for each individual.
Totally. Right.
So Yeah. So, and you're right. Like a lot of it comes just from experience, and there are a lot of classic things that do work that people have gotten away from.
Like, you mean regarding health and whatever. One thing I would just add is that, like, yeah, there is a giant disparity between people's responses to testosterone, and so much of it actually has to do with how healthy that person is. I know that sounds really simple. It seems a little belittling to people, but you really ought to look at, because there are various points in my TRT tenure where I would get fucking one side effect or the other from just raising the dose or having estrogen too high, and then I would just go back to the drawing board and look at what was happening with my physiology. What was the, I don't know, as simple as what was the processed food that had entirely too much sodium that was contributing to the elevated BP that I was having, and thus neurological issues from estradiol being a little bit over range. Could I cut that out and change it? Adding cardio, heavy cardio, running, to my regimen. This is going to sound crazy, but dramatically changed my capacity to deal with high doses of testosterone. I had taken years off of running and still lifted weights. And I know that people think that that is like enough, but if you want cardiovascularly to be super, super functional and healthy, to be able to tolerate maybe elevated levels of estrogen or very high levels of testosterone that you may fucking need, cardio would change your life. And so, like, I posted somewhat recently on the YouTube channel. I'm just finishing up running cream 3 pumps a day, 200 milligrams per milliliter, plus 50 milligrams of prop every third day. And at the peak of that, I'm at 3,200, and I've never fucking felt better, man. Now I'm going to remove the cream because the hair loss and, the Proviron plus the cream really kind of accelerated hair loss more than I thought. But dude, your physiology and you optimizing every facet of it will change your response to testosterone, and a lot of the pesky side effects that people have can go away.
You're also helping your hematocrit levels, which totally. when you exercise, you're helping bring down your red blood cell count, and that also is going to reduce potential side effects from hypertension.
Yes,
it will allow you to handle more testosterone without the hypertension side effects.
Definitely, yeah. Oh yeah, And my BP sitting really nice at 3,000.
Yeah, right.
Crazy.
Yeah. So for sure, there's differences everywhere. So. I think
DHEA,
the question was, sorry, I keep coming back to that. Sorry, I went on a tangent there.
Well, I see what you're trying to do. I mean, you're taking the general overview, or like the situation in which people may need DHEA or pregnenolone, or just the thought of adding, additional compounds, like from this perspective of people respond differently. Your health influences how you respond to testosterone, and there's a smaller group than we think that is having all manner of side effects that need all this intervention and whatever. But just your general take on adding those hormones. I've been running DHEA the entire time I've been on TRT, not pregnenolone consistently. I mean, I take a 30 milligram pregnenolone capsule maybe once a week. I don't feel like I need it, but who knows? Maybe my libido wouldn't be as good if I wasn't on DHEA. There's a lot of downstream stuff that DHEA does. So, what are your take on those hormones? Does everybody need to add them? Should you look at your labs first? Have you seen them make significant changes when people's protocols weren't good?
Yeah. So, that's a great question. I don't know that everybody needs to take those supplements. It's kind of it's in the algorithm of things that I'll try if things are wrong.
Right.
One of the reasons that what you start to learn when you do this a lot is that when you get good at this is that optimizing their sense of well-being is dependent on a delicate balance between all of the hormones. Not just testosterone. It's not just testosterone. It's not just estradiol. It's all of them, and they all have to be in a delicate balance with each other. And that delicate balance is different for everybody, like ratios. And like I like to explain it. I try to explain it to people by saying everybody's got these Goldilocks zones for their hormones, right? And where everything's just right. And we got to get all your hormones into this Goldilocks zone, not just testosterone, not just estradiol.
Yes.
This includes progesterone, cortisol, even prolactin to a degree, DHEA. So for some people, testosterone can, it seems to affect either positively or negatively the steroidogenesis of the upstream or downstream hormones. And that can throw things out of balance. one of the techniques we can use to balance, say, progesterone, possibly cortisol, is through, if we take pregnenolone, it's the precursor to all hormones. It makes it easier for your body to convert through steroidogenesis to all of the upstream hormones from pregnenolone, which is all of them. I'm sorry, downstream hormones from pregnenolone, which is all of them.
Yep. Right.
So, and that can help balance. It can help balance. So people use HCG for this reason as well, but pregnenolone can do it as well too.
Yeah.
So I find that the blood work doesn't tell us much about whether or not we need these.
I found that
more
too.
important to go based on feeling.
I found that fucking too, man.
Yeah. Yep. So with DHEA, again, this is something that you just see over time and experience. With DHEA, I can say that whether people are high or low, I rarely find it effective to add DHEA. Now, not that there aren't some cases where people really do have a benefit from those, and I add it into people's protocol just to see.
Yeah.
A lot of what dialing in is we do things that make scientific sense, and we essentially experiment and we try different things to see if it works. I will add DHEA in a heartbeat to a protocol if people are having certain things that I know DHEA can benefit, just to see if it works.
Like what under aromatization? That's one thing that I added to a client's protocol. Guy's estradiol numbers were in range, but for him, he needed a little higher estrogen for sex drive. And DHEA,
I see that a lot. That's why HCG helps people. Like if you'll notice, HCG, it's like the magic bullet to some people's protocol.
Yep, some people.
It also is the downfall to a lot of people's protocol.
Oh, totally, absolutely. Right? Yeah, it's the killer of everything. Yeah.
One of the reasons I see that it positively affects people's protocol is because they just need a higher level of estradiol than other people, and the HCG helps bring that up. We're gonna get a cat in the video here.
Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, I love it, bro. That's what's up. Yeah, I mean, HCG can make or break it. I mean, for sure, it's just two different sides of the spectrum. Like it either turns libido back on, you get load size, you get sensation better, all that stuff. It doesn't affect erectile quality, or it can do some of those things but affect erectile quality via pushing estrogen over range for people. I mean, there are people out there like Dave Lee, who's a YouTuber and a consultant on hormones, et cetera, that think that HCG via it being I guess we could call it somewhat of an estrogenic or a feminizing hormone that that no one should fucking take it. No, I disagree with that, because I think, again, it's really the best we have. I've tried running Kisspeptin 10 at reasonable doses consistently experimentally, and I certainly, while at best it basically prevented large scale testicular atrophy, I also had some sensation loss, and so I had to switch back to HCG while keeping Kisspeptin as like a here and there libido and erectile quality enhancer, which is do. So, I mean, the spectrum is just different between people.
Again, it's more testament that there's just a vast difference between the way each individual reacts to these compounds, and it works for some people and it doesn't for others. So.
Yeah, totally. I found DHEA improve sensation, genital sensation, when a person didn't respond to HCG favorably. I haven't, I've looked into it, but I haven't really identified exactly what is happening there. I mean, sensation is largely controlled by dorsal nerve, pudendal nerve, and then otherwise upstream central mechanisms. So any insight on that? Because HCG typically tends to improve sensation, genital sensation, just like dick sensation, in guys that are on TRT that may have a lack of sensation over time. But if guys can't tolerate it, bringing DHEA into the picture resolves that problem. Any insight into what's going on there?
I mean, it just becomes complex. Too, right? Yeah, like incredibly complex. And I mean, there's a lot of evidence too that DHEA, there's a lot of receptors in the brain, a lot of neuroreceptors that DHEA actually does agonize, and and it can help different things.
Yeah,
like it's impossible to tell. What specifically DHEA actually does, and how it will affect an individual. What I've found is, for people having trouble with some of these side effects, is like we have to start hitting all of the all of the hormones, right? So we have to play with all the hormones to figure out which one is causing these sensation problems or this erectile dysfunction, from DHEA to progesterone to cortisol to prolactin. A lot of people blame problems on prolactin. Prolactin certainly can hurt, but what I find in the field is that it's rarely prolactin that's causing a problem, even if it's a little high.
Yeah, I mean, 21, 22 wouldn't be particularly problematic for some people. Above that, though, let's call it 30 plus nanograms per milliliter, and your sensation will be markedly reduced. Libido will be markedly reduced, and fucking erectile quality is.
And it's still individual specific. Like some people would have sensation problems with a prolactin in the 20s, and some people wouldn't have any problems with prolactin in the 30s.
Yeah, especially if they're, on TRT, or if they've got the rest of the hormone. It's not just prolactin, right? If they got the rest of the hormone.
Yeah.
I could have 35 nanograms per milliliter prolactin, but a really, really awesome TRT protocol, and still largely sexually function pretty well. I'll tell you what, regarding prolactin, though, I ran a couple cycles of cabergoline and took my prolactin sub 5 nanograms per milliliter. And it's a big difference, in refractory period. It really, really is, bro. I mean, 30, 40 minutes later, you're ready to go. Whereas, otherwise, if you're above 10, 15 or whatever, you're like a 1 session dude, which is fine for girls. But, sometimes if you want to run a couple sessions, that lower prolactin helps.
Prolactin is important for dopamine production.
Tubuloinfundibular dopamine neurons, those control prolactin, right? So if prolactin is too low, are they, is that making it so that those dopamine neurons aren't firing at high enough quantity, or is there some other mechanism by which really low prolactin messes with dopamine?
I usually know the exact mechanisms of action, and this one I don't. I just know that prolactin is important.
For sure, if you crash prolactin, I mean, there's guys having libido issues on crash prolactin, no question. So whatever that is likely that mechanism. I recently I found a short of yours, which I actually ended up tracking down the video of the live stream. I didn't know you had all these live streams on your channel, by the way.
Yeah.
Which are super awesome and epic and useful and highly information dense, where you were talking about androgen induced lethargy.
Yeah.
So this has happened to me before, particularly injecting high doses of long esters, testosterone cypionate. Okay, so if I run 100 milligrams at a time, which I prefer doing if I'm running a long ester, just more at once, less frequently, better for the sexual system for me personally. And I do that for a couple weeks. I'll start noticing lethargy. It's this somewhat debilitating kind of brain lethargy. Physically, I feel fine. But there's a brain lethargy there.
Yeah.
And hematocrit's in range, estradiol is in range. Like there are no markers. I hadn't run cortisol at the time that I could figure out what the fuck is going on. Interestingly, I haven't messed with a long ester in quite a while because I usually run cream or prop these days. Running cream and prop, I can push very high levels of testosterone and not have androgen induced lethargy. And interestingly, like in my experimentation transitioning off of cream and proviron as kind of a DHT experiment, and running cream and prop at the same time, there was a period where I had the androgen induced lethargy. It was a couple hours. I'm like, oh fuck, here this is again.
Yeah.
And then I dosed more prop, just an extra 20 milligrams that night. I'm like, let me just, am I troughing? And is this trough like reducing cortisol? Is it affecting neurotransmitters? Is it inducing some sort of cytokine reaction from the gut? I just had all these theories, and then injecting more testosterone solved the problem. So just wanted to throw my story out there.
Yeah.
But this happens to people, and it's actually on the help form. So you explained, your position on it. What is your take? What do you think happens there? Because it certainly does happen to some people.
Yeah. Your story is actually really interesting, and I've heard of that before. I don't know if you knew Danny Boso when he had his channel.
Yep, I know about it.
Yep. He would say the same thing. Like he was able to dose more testosterone and actually feel better from what he thought was a lethargy from possibly too much testosterone.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah. Which I don't quite understand the mechanisms. But one thing that I've seen, one of the mechanisms is this, and I see it quite often, is this androgen induced lethargy, right? And it can feel like you just hit a wall, right? Like all of a sudden just boom. Like you said, it seems to be more mental. Like, I mean, you're just so tired. Like all you can think about is, all I want to do is lay on the couch and I don't want to do another single thing.
Yeah.
And it's debilitating.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
So, and interestingly enough, so what I get is a lot of people, you start with testosterone, maybe you add an androgen because of joint pain, and then you're like, well, this has all been great, everything's going so well, like, can I do a little more and feel even better? So people add like oxandrolone onto that. And I get this a lot. When they add the oxandrolone, especially if you add too much, you get that lethargy, right? And people start thinking, oh, well, oxandrolone, or the last thing I added, must cause me to feel this debilitating fatigue. Therefore, it's that thing and it's bad. When it's not oxandrolone itself or whatever you added last, it's the total androgen load. Yeah. That's actually causing this androgen-induced lethargy. And nobody knows all of the mechanisms behind it. One of them that sounds plausible is, but for you indicated that it wasn't. Well, you said you were also able to add more.
With the short ester, with fast acting testosterone, yes, but with longer esters, I had identified it basically being on the trough most of the time. At least in this situation with fast acting esters, it was like during a trough, I started to feel it again. I'm like, here we fucking go again. Here's this shit again.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, am I troughing, and that is causing some hormone imbalance that is unseen or that I haven't been able to measure at this point? Let me just inject more testosterone, and it helped. So I mean, it could be some change in neurochemistry, an increase in inflammatory cytokines as a result of or metabolizing the androgens from the system, and perhaps some stress on the liver. I just don't know.
That actually the cytokines does make sense. I hadn't thought of that, but that actually, I mean, because that would produce like an inflammatory response, which would cause fatigue. That's interesting.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like I explain it a lot of times, is what I see is that just this androgen load just increases your hematocrit to the point where you get some symptoms of hypertension. And one of those symptoms of hypertension is fatigue. Again, there could be other causes for this. That's just one of the ones that makes sense that I've seen. Usually it's attributed to somebody who has a high hematocrit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and do you suggest people go and just get blood drawn, get blood taken? I mean, do phlebotomies, or do you?
I don't, because then you're going to, then you're going to reduce your ferritin and your iron, and then you're going to have fatigue from that. Increase in red blood cells is not bad. It's how our body carries oxygen. It's actually a positive thing. Erythrocytosis is an increase in red blood cells, not in the clotting factor. So your platelets are fine, thrombin, prothrombin, everything is fine. But the red blood cells, increase. Now there can be a point when the red blood cells get too much, to the point where the blood is a little thick. It is a little hard for your heart to pump around, and your blood pressure can go up, and you can get symptoms of hypertension that way.
Yeah.
But above the range hematocrit is fine. When we're talking 52, 53, and there's not a specific number for any one person. Like some people will start having problems at 54. Some people are fine at 56.
Yeah.
It's just different for everybody.
Sure.
But so the idea is, oh my gosh, you have 51% hematocrit, you should go dump blood. That's just a scared provider not understanding the science behind testosterone and erythrocytosis. It's called polycythemia when your red blood, everything increases, your red blood cells, your platelets, your clotting factors. That's called polycythemia. There is a difference. A lot of providers will use erythrocytosis and polycythemia interchangeably, but they are different. Right. Erythrocytosis is just the increase of red blood cells. That's actually a good thing. Polycythemia, bad. That's when platelets increase as well. Yeah. So again, the blood dumps just came from a scared provider. That's how you handle polycythemia. Is one of the best ways to handle polycythemia is through donating blood, and people do it too much. And I see it all the time. I get people with low iron and low ferritin, and then if iron is the element that, and in hemoglobin, that binds oxygen. if we don't have enough iron, and ferritin is what allows iron to absorb in the blood.
Yeah. Right.
If we don't have enough iron, then we can't bond as much oxygen. Oxygen obviously repletes our ATP. ATP is our body's currency for energy. So if we don't have enough iron, we don't have enough energy, and you can get all kinds of lack of sense of well-being, erectile dysfunction, and fatigue from low iron.
So, I mean, what would you suggest people do? I know there's Naringen, which is like an extract from grapefruit that over time seems to be able to lower hematocrit. Obviously, there's drinking loads of water, which may not be comfortable for everybody. There's obviously cardio. I mean, you just kind of tell people run that stuff and see how they fare.
I do. I mean, it's also about let's find the dose that you can handle.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're slightly high, then we could do some of those things. So yeah, like you said, Naringen, nattokinase. Take a daily aspirin. Like you said, cardiovascular will help reduce red blood cells.
Love it.
And omega-3 fatty acids actually thin the blood as well. You know, you get some guys who really like the effects of a sort of high dose of testosterone. But the problem is that they go up to 58, 59% hematocrit. And in that case, it's like, well, I don't think we can just run that dose. We gotta find one that you can handle. Yeah. Well, you know, in conjunction with all these other factors that we can do to kind of bring your hematocrit down.
Totally.
But usually somebody at 53, 53-ish percent, like that's probably fine, right?
Yeah.
And we could just do some of those ancillary things such as, that we mentioned to just help with that hematocrit issue.
Totally. I love it, bro. Okay. So estradiol, let's talk about estrogen, right? This is like, it's either demonized or it's propped up. It seems to, like we said, in terms of the disparities between people on TRT and their response to testosterone, it seems to be, it's like the main focus, although all these other hormones, DHEA, Pregnenolone, Progesterone, cortisol, are very fucking relevant here. What is your take on estrogen and libido? Meaning, is estrogen, once androgens are in a reasonable place, the driver of libido, in your opinion? Why is it that like there are guys that above a certain range of estradiol lose libido? Is in your opinion, in your experience, the balance between estrogen, testosterone, but also DHEA, maybe Pregnenolone, progesterone, DHT? Does this factor into why some people at higher levels of estrogen feel fine and whatever? Like just break down estradiol and libido, because I think I've heard you say that that you're sort of more on the, well, I mean, I guess more of the lenient side regarding estrogen, not necessarily letting it get to 100, but not fucking taking it down to 15.
Yeah. Again, this is another area where everybody's just vastly different. And, and like we were describing before, some people need a high estradiol for their libido and for their sense of well-being.
Yeah. Right.
And some people are estradiol is almost like completely toxic to them. Like they have very low sensitivity or a very high sensitivity to estradiol, and so it's just people are vastly different. I do find that there is a correlation between balance of all the hormones.
Yeah.
We talk about estrogen dominance in females. Now, testosterone is the most dominant sex steroid in both males and females. But they call it estrogen dominance just because if your estrogen is too high, even though it's not as high as testosterone, it's out of balance with progesterone. And that can happen with men too. We can have estrogen dominance can affect men too if your estrogen is high and your progesterone is low. So for some people, I can actually just increase their progesterone. Yeah. Or progesterone agonization. This is also where Androgen comes in wonderfully. Androgen has a 20% affinity to the progesterone receptor.
Oh, I did not know that. Interesting. So wow. Your point is, you can agonize the progesterone receptors or give a person more progesterone, and that will somehow antagonize. I believe I've read in the medical literature that there's like some sort of balancing or antagonistic effect to estradiol from progesterone. Is that what you found?
Well, it's more of a it helps to magnify the positive effects of estradiol.
Right. Okay.
It
Right.
doesn't. So if I have somebody who's like, again, men can have estrogen dominance too, where their estrogen, it's not even necessary that their estrogen is too high. It's just too high and out of balance with progesterone.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so like, and that's kind of why one of the, because, you know, the reasons why nandrolone is notoriously beneficial for joint pain are not completely known. There's theories that it increases synovial fluid. What makes sense is that it's systemically more anti-inflammatory than even testosterone. So the anti-inflammatory nature would reduce joint pain.
Sure.
You know, but it's not completely known. One of the theories is that because it agonizes the progesterone receptor, it helps magnify effects of the lubricating effects that estradiol has on joints.
Yeah.
So again, like, yes, sometimes the sexual dysfunction, like I actually have, well, I mean, the first thing I do, so I think in one of the questions you were going to ask it, you know, what is the order that you would treat this, right? Treat sexual dysfunction. And the first thing I look at, you know, I have an algorithm that I go and we just go down the list. Okay, here's the things it could be. Let's just start knocking the things off the list. The first one we always check is estradiol. Let's play with your estradiol and see, is it too high? Is it too low for you?
Yeah.
In cases where that doesn't work, sometimes the next thing I try is usually progesterone. Progesterone actually does help a lot.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I can, if we can balance the estradiol and progesterone, that's probably the next biggest reason why people have sexual dysfunction.
Yep.
And I can do that through nandrolone, which is interesting. Instead of actually giving men progesterone, which I have done before and works.
Yeah.
I can just give them nandrolone, and the 20% affinity to the progesterone receptor actually, like, it's kind of funny because nandrolone has this myth that it causes decadic, that it actually causes, but I get, you know, in the right context, in the right protocol, you give men nandrolone and they have a better libido, better erections.
Right. Does it not elevate prolactin? You know, I don't know a whole lot about nandrolone, but that does it not?
No, that's a myth. So that was a thought that it elevated prolactin, and that's why it caused decadic, but that's a myth.
Okay.
Individually, for some people, and it's very few, it can increase prolactin, but so can testosterone. Some people have that response. It's far and few between, but some people have that response. Universally, it does not increase prolactin, and neither does trenbolone, neither does any of the NOR19. See, trenbolone is antagonistic to the progesterone receptor. It's completely opposite. It's antagonistic to progesterone and cortisol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly guys on TRT that, you know, they push the higher end of the range of prolactin via aromatization of test to estradiol. And estradiol has like direct relationship, really a direct causative increase in prolactin for certain susceptible individuals via, I believe, the dopamine D2 receptors on the pituitary. But so okay, that's your order. First estradiol, then maybe adding progesterone into the regimen.
Yeah, and I'll check their hematocrit too to make sure that's not hypertension causing it, because that can too. But yeah, then progesterone. Let's play with your progesterone to see if that can help. You know, again, one of the last things I'll check is prolactin, because honestly, and just from a sheer volume of experience, it's rarely prolactin that causes these issues. And not that it never does, but it rarely is.
Yeah, it certainly can, but yeah, maybe it's just not elevated in these people. So, I mean, you're giving people nandrolone. Do you ever, give people, I think you mentioned you may give people progesterone cream. And if so, like, what is the typical response from that?
It's usually great. I mean, if your progesterone is low, right? Now, sometimes the problem is the progesterone is too high.
Shit.
And again, we can't do this for TRT, but strangely enough, back in the world, like that's why some people actually really increase their libido from trenbolone, right? Because it's actually an antagonist to progesterone, and some people need less progesterone agonization. So that really actually, for some people, who are sensitive to progesterone, it really helps their sexual function. Trenbolone helps their sexual function.
Yeah, I've heard I've heard all the stories.
Yeah, but that would be the reason why. So so sometimes it can be too much, but yeah, I've had a lot of luck with men in progesterone cream,
Wow.
and cortisol too. Cortisol also gets demonized as the stress hormone, right? So it's bad. We don't want cortisol.
Right.
Cortisol there's a lot of people who have low cortisol, and cortisol is very important. It's important for a sense of well-being, energy, libido. All the hormones actually have the similar importance.
Yeah, you're right about that. Like if you went hypothyroid, but your testosterone was 1500 and your estradiol was 35 and prolactin was enraged, you probably wouldn't have libido if you were hypothyroid, because they all just like one of them's messed up, even though the other ones are okay. Yep. It's going to contribute to sexual dysfunction, which is why I think, this whole idea of hormone balance and everything being in the right ranges, or the right ranges for that person, is really paramount. I mean, that's really the answer. That's really the answer. Yeah. So let's talk about esters. I'll tell you, kind of just frankly, I've had a better experience on cream and prop versus cypionate or enanthate. Number one, I think it's because it's a lot easier for me to dial those things in. Like it could take me a week and a half, 2 weeks to kind of find the dose that makes sense for me. Whereas, with cypionate, if you plot it out on steroid plotter or whatever, if you look at how it operates in the blood, it's taken 3 weeks, 4 weeks to ultimately reach steady state or where it's going to go. So it takes longer to dial in. I also find that I seem to get more estrogenic side effects on long esters, I think, because they're sticking around longer. So I just have no trough in estradiol if I'm sitting very, very steady state in testosterone and therefore estrogen, where it's like on certain doses of prop, I've needed to like bump my estrogen up, like, because I wasn't I would trough and there wasn't enough estradiol coming around. And I have some other theories on why that's happening, but generally I like to be able to dial in quickly. I like the more instant sense of cognition and mental energy from like testosterone propionate, as an example. And I don't really mind pinning or applying, in the case of cream, every day. I really just don't mind doing that. So have you also seen people respond better to different esters, or is it more about if they must be on cypionate, just kind of dialing them in better, or dealing with these other hormones or whatever? Like, what's your take on difference in responses to esters?
Yeah. Your experience is not super unique in that. Well, I mean, again, I can't express enough how everybody's different. Yeah, and different people are responsive to different things. Yeah. Certainly, some people respond better to prop. I will try prop for people who can't seem to dial into cypionate. Yeah. The reason we use cypionate first. Yeah. It's just the most readily available and the cheapest one from all the pharmacies. Propionate is actually expensive through pharmacies just because it's more rarely used, so it's just more expensive. Yeah. For most people, the idea of being optimal and feeling optimal, not even being optimal, because I would argue that, as you've indicated, propionate is better for performance.
Yeah, right? Sure. Yeah.
We're getting that higher spike. If we look at a graph of blood levels over time, you're going to spike higher with propionate than you do cypionate. And that's really beneficial to some people. It's especially beneficial for performance. Yeah. In the TRT world, we're more looking for a sense of well-being and feeling good, feeling optimal. Right. And feeling optimal is usually easier to dial in with steady testosterone levels and consistent testosterone levels, which is easier with longer esters. Yeah. Right. I think people who do go to prop, it's just it requires more knowledge, right? You have to really understand the pharmacokinetics of the prop and understand that, okay, you may need to take it every day. And so it's a little more work. It's a little more understanding from people who go there. Yeah,
for sure.
And so, of course, somebody as knowledgeable as yourself could definitely handle the prop, and you don't mind doing everyday injections. So yeah, I would imagine that would be that would work better for, for the average novice. It's just so much easier just to use cypionate 2 injections per week.
Totally.
But yeah, if cypionate isn't working, that is one thing that I will try is let's go to propionate and see if that works better for you.
Yeah,
or even adding cream. As you've indicated, a lot of people, for sense of well-being and sexual function, like DHT is really a magic bullet, and it's terrible that Proviron is not available here in the United States. I always say that Primobolan and Proviron not being available in U.S. pharmacies is a testament to how little we understand these compounds. Because if you want to talk about efficacy, and I hate to use the word safe because testosterone is not dangerous, but if you want to talk about having a lower side effect profile than even testosterone or anything else, Primobolan and Proviron's your answer. And Proviron is just more like DHT, so you can take Proviron and have more similar effects as DHT than any of the other derivatives, DHT derivatives.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Proviron is like a life-changing drug. I feel the same way you do, bro. I mean, I wish it was like, I wish you could get it prescribed from your clinic. My clinic is Defy in Tampa, and they've got, they can prescribe Anavar, but they can't prescribe Proviron. I ran Proviron 2 separate times. The most recent induced some hair loss and shedding in a more accelerated way than I even thought was possible for my genetics. So there's that. But other than that, though, I mean, the masculinity, the sense of calm and almost sort of stoic well-being, the fucking sexual function, the libido, and the erection quality. It's just unmatched, man. I mean, you get close with other protocols, but Proviron on top of TRT is just very, very strong.
Have you ever tried Primobolan with your testosterone?
No, but I want to.
Yeah, you should. I mean, especially people who are slightly sensitive to estradiol, it's a perfect, because it controls your estradiol. It's a perfect blend. It works so well for so many people.
Yeah, there's one guy, that I could essentially acquire that from, and I just haven't pulled the trigger on it. I think it's relatively expensive, but yeah, it's on my list, man. What is your between Primobolan, Proviron, and like Anavar? Which is the most hair safe? Is Primo as nuking of the hairline as Proviron is in your experience, or what?
The answer to that, no. Proviron is more closely has similar pharmacokinetics as DHT. That's also why it's a substrate for the HSD enzyme. It breaks down muscle mass, so that's why Proviron is not anabolic. Right. Just like DHT is not anabolic, only because it's broken down by the HSD enzyme in the muscle, and so is Proviron. The other ones are not substrates for the HSD enzyme, so such as Primobolan, Oxandrol, and Stanozol. They're not substrates, so they don't break down in muscle mass. Right. That's why they're anabolic. But so here's the order that I see effectiveness from, and I don't want to put like oxandrolone in that. I want to do the derivatives that we use to help control estrogen, and that would just be Primobolan, Masteron, and Proviron, right? So the order that works for most people is Primobolan works the best for most people. Seconded probably by Proviron, and then third Masteron. Now, there's some people who react better to Masteron than any of them. There's some people who react better to Proviron than any of the other ones. But if you want to talk about what works for most people, for a DHT derivative that also helps control estradiol, it's probably Primobolan, Proviron, and then Masteron.
Now, what is the deal with that? I mean, like, so Primo is not being able to, it can't be prescribed here in the States because of what? I've actually never looked into it. I mean, I know you can get it overseas.
It just was never FDA approved. And I don't know. I do have a pharmacy that keeps telling me they're going to be offering Primobolan.
Really?
They've been saying this for like a year and a half. And they still say it's on their catalog. They still say that they're going to get it. So I'm going to let everybody know when we can get that, because I think it will be huge.
that would be like, I'd hate to sound like one of those young kids that uses the phrase game changer, but
Yeah.
that would be an absolute game changer,
Yeah.
dude. If your TRT clinic had fucking Primo, I mean, yeah, it isn't about exclusively, at least, seeking anabolism. Like it's the estrogen control. I mean, for sure, I did not have to do any number of commonly executed estrogen management stuff like zinc or calcium D-glucarate on Proviron with TRT. Like it just did it for me.
Yeah, and you get all the benefits of the increased androgens too, right? So I mean, that's right. Especially for people who are sensitive to estradiol. It's like it's the game changer, because you can like, a lot of the problem is that people take testosterone. They're so sensitive to the estradiol that they can only take a small dose of testosterone.
Right.
And they still have symptoms of hypogonadism because there's not enough androgens to resolve their symptoms of hypogonadism. So we need more androgens. And that's where, like, another reason I can use nandrolone is, nandrolone doesn't convert to estradiol. So now we can pop it on top of testosterone. And it helps people who need more androgens but can't handle the estradiol. And this is a way to do it without an anastrozole, so we don't have to use an AI. I'm not completely averse to AIs, in context, but
in context, right?
We try not to use them. So that's one way to do it. Now, if we had Primobolan, it would be simple. It's a potent estrogen control, and it's an androgen that has a very low side effect profile.
Yeah, completely. You make a great point about, like, well, first of all, non-aromatizable androgens being effective, but like, really what you're saying is some people just need a higher androgen load, and they're not able to actually therapeutically reach that threshold because of conversion to estradiol. That really sucks, because if you need a higher androgen load for erection quality, like, one thing I'll tell you, 3,000 nanograms per deciliter, I'm a walking fucking boner. Whereas like, things are pretty okay otherwise, like on lower levels of testosterone, but it's certainly different at 3,000. Like, my energy, my strength, again, my cardiovascular function, I can eat. Dude, I don't even know how many calories I'm eating because I'm not tracking it, but I'm eating 4 meals, maybe 5 meals a day. I mean, granted, it's chicken, rice, it's vegetables, it's all real good food, but I could never get away with eating as much food as I'm eating right now on very high test on lower levels of test. And so, what Ryan is saying here, guys, is really important. Like, if you maybe need a higher androgen load, you got to figure out how to do it. You got to figure out, whether it's managing the estrogen with Primo or something else, or it's getting on some of these non-aromatizable androgens. You got to figure that out if you actually really need those androgens.
This is kind of off of this topic, but I just remembered it, and I wanted to discuss this because we do talk about estrogen a lot, right? And one of the reasons, another reason that estrogen can cause like things like anxiety as it gets high, is that, I think we were also talking, or I think, in the email, we were kind of mentioned that it does increase the production of serotonin. Right. It can also reduce some of the serotonin receptors as well. It gets confusing.
Estrogen.
Estrogen can, estradiol specifically.
Right.
But another function that, and this seems to be the reason for actually both low and high estrogen causing anxiety. It also slows down the COMT pathway and the MAO pathway. So the catecholamines that testosterone increases the tyrosine kinase, which produces all the catecholamines. Norepinephrine, epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and dopamine. So now normally what happens is our body has these defense mechanisms. You produce dopamine, and we actually produce enough of these monoamine oxidase enzymes to break it down, and the COMT pathway breaks down the catecholamines as well.
Right.
It breaks it down as fast as they're produced. So you need something to intervene in order for us to have a sustainable amount of these catecholamines.
Right.
So our body is actually dependent on those intervening that pathway in order to have enough dopamine or whatever. So estrogen turns out to be that pathway. Estrogen slows down COMT and MAO, monoamine oxidase,
right,
which slows down the breakdown of all of the catecholamines. When we slow, so, you know, that's where it becomes dopaminergic. Testosterone increases dopamine production, but also the estrogen helps dopamine survive.
Right. By
However,
preventing clearance. Yeah, I get it.
By preventing clearance.
Yeah.
When we get too much estrogen, it also allows norepinephrine and epinephrine to survive, right?
Yeah.
Which ignite our sympathetic nervous system, and we just
Totally.
get into this fight or flight state. So that's why we get anxiety, right?
Yeah.
When estrogen is too low, it actually does not slow down that pathway and allows our COMT and MAO to break down dopamine as soon as it is made, and then we don't have enough dopamine. So that's kind of why we can get depressed and also anxiety when our estrogen is low.
The low estrogen state is I wouldn't wish it on anyone, man.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I did not know about like the monoamine oxidase and COMT mechanism, so that's really interesting that you bring that up. I'll have to put that on my like list to research, but I know for sure that estradiol E2 specifically inhibits the expression of the SERT, which is the serotonin transporter, and that's kind of like acting like an SSRI. So it keeps more serotonin around, and for sure, like I've done experiments where I wanted to see like what the sexual function would be, where the threshold was on estradiol. If it went below 15, would everything fall off the bus, the wheels, or would like between 15 and 20 be really good for everything? And being down there for a while, I was mildly depressed, and so I wanted to experiment thinking about these serotonin mechanisms. With bringing 5-HTP, I even ran some Panax ginseng, which is known to increase serotonin, and these things did actually help. So no question. In addition to the mechanism you just laid out, like estradiol in a reasonable range contributes to how good you feel, and and your mood. And when it gets lower, you're just going to feel fucking terrible. Unless you know how to manipulate the neurochemistry that is obviously going awry from lower estradiol, you're going to feel terrible. And you're just going to think, for people that require a little bit lower estrogen to function, you're going to think you can't do that. But just a tip for people, maybe add some tryptophan, maybe a little SJW, maybe some Bacopa, which is also serotonergic, or other serotonergic compounds mildly. And that may help you alleviate some of the cognitive and mental or sort of like well-being deficits that you have on lower estrogen.
It's actually fascinating and incredibly complex, which is why when things get this complex, we have to just go back to what do we see in the field?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think another one of your questions too was, what do you do when you have somebody who's incredibly sensitive to estradiol? And it gets tough. It's so tough.
Right.
Because we need enough for all the reasons aforementioned reasons, we need estradiol.
Yeah, we do.
However, they're having side effects from estradiol.
I know that there is also people that don't really seem to be affected by elevated estrogen one way or the other, and so
most people are that way. Most men are not affected by estradiol. I mean, there certainly are a fair number who are, but more than half of the people do not have estrogenic issues.
I mean, in what range though? I mean, are we talking from 60 picograms per milliliter or above? Or are we talking between 30 and 50?
I'll qualify that by saying by being on their TRT dose with no aromatase inhibitor.
Right. Okay.
And that could get them anywhere from whatever 40 to 70.
Yeah. Okay. And you don't find erectile issues, up at 70 with estradiol with your people? Is it? And if so, is it because their T dose is high enough or what?
Yeah, it's certainly not universal. Most people don't have problems with a 70 estradiol. Most people don't.
Okay. And what do you think is the reason for that? Because I have over aromatizers in my kind of client base that like we'll work on it over time, reducing the booze and whatever. But like we can't get the T high enough because estradiol, I think there's just not a favorable ratio. We can't get the T high enough to where they're going to, persist through that elevated estradiol and be able to tolerate it, because the estradiol just comes up in somewhat of a disproportionate fucking way, and therein it causes an issue.
Yeah.
How are you able to get people to get above that? You just have them on higher doses of test. Like, what is your strategy? Or they just respond fine to 60 or 70?
Yeah. Well, most people are just fine. But like some of the really sensitive people, like again, I can. That's when Androgen comes in happy. It comes in positive, or if you can do this outside of our pharmaceutical system, then Pregnenolone would be perfect for these people, because you can just increase their androgen load and reduce their estradiol.
Yes.
But some of the things I try to do, here's some of the things I try to do. Like, remember I talked about estrogen dominance?
Yeah.
It can be a function of they need a certain balance of the estrogen and progesterone. So sometimes when I get their progesterone up, they can handle a little bit more estradiol.
Yeah.
So I can get them progesterone, and then that allows them to handle the estradiol. The other thing is it seems to be a sensitivity, an oversensitivity from an estrogen receptor standpoint. Now, if we've been in a low estrogen environment for a long time, our body, we've evolved many mechanisms to deal with high and low hormones.
Yeah. Okay.
When hormones are low, we become more sensitive to the hormones, so that we have sensitivity to the few hormones that are in our blood.
Yeah.
So if we come from a low estrogen environment and then suddenly flood our body with estrogen, that's when people have a lot of side effects.
Yeah. Sure.
If we can, now your body, I hate to use the word down regulate, because people have a problem with that word, but so I'll use auto regulate. Like, our receptors will auto regulate over time, which means our body gets used to the higher hormone levels. So what I can do is slowly what's the word I'm looking for?
Acclimate, maybe?
Acclimate, that's the word I was looking for. Slowly acclimate people to the higher estrogen by just slowly raising it. And so, like, this is when I'll use an Estradiol. We can bring an Estradiol down to an acceptable level, but I don't have people take it. I think the wrong way to take an Estradiol is to take it once or twice a week, or however many times. Don't take it on a schedule. Take it only when you need it. Take it because it will work pretty quickly. It works within a few hours.
Yeah.
Take a small dose only as necessary to mitigate a side effect, right? And what you find is as your body gets used to the estrogen and your receptors start to auto-regulate, you will find you're going longer and longer between having to take an Estradiol, and then one day you just don't have to take it anymore.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I mean, if that methodology could get a lot of people off of that additional drug, which in and of itself can cause side effects from dropping estrogen too fucking quickly, too much, that would be great. That'd be great, man. Let's, for my audience, talk about your clinic. So you started this clinic in 22, was it 21, 22?
Yeah, I originally started it in 22. Yeah, I did have my visions with one of the providers maligned, so we took a break, and then now I have multiple providers. Like, I built back a more robust system with multiple providers, so that if all my eggs aren't in one basket, so if the vision's maligned again, then I still have more providers.
Oh, totally. So you're in New York, Vermont, Florida, Washington, Connecticut, Colorado, Oregon, Kentucky, Nevada, Arizona. Are you intending to go PA, Ohio, other states? Is this all the states that you got, or is there more?
No, for right now, but very shortly, within a month, we're going to increase like 20 more states, because
great.
I just partnered with another provider who has like 28 state licenses. So
that's a beautiful thing, man. That is a beautiful.
So yeah, the goal is eventually here, and hopefully sooner than later we'll have all 50 states. But we're about to open up like California, Texas, 20 more states.
Epic. That'll be huge, man. The site, the company is called Hormones for Me. It's hormonesforme.com. And Ryan, like, you do the consults there, right? Or you do a good degree of the consults?
Yeah, I do all the original consults, and then and that's how we differ, right, from any other clinic. Is, again, I partner with the providers that share my vision and that understand that I just have so much experience. I have over 2 decades of experience in this. I've successfully guided over 20,000 people through the use of hormones. I've just seen it so much. And so, I partner with providers that share the vision on how to do this properly. And I do the consults, and I leave a detailed set of notes. And now the final say is up to the provider. That's how I'm allowed to make suggestions. The final say is up to the provider, but again, the providers, we share a vision. how to do this. So yeah, I do all the concepts. I lay everything out. I stack all your blood work and the detailed set of notes in front of the provider, so that now when they do the telemedicine appointment, they look at all the notes and read, what's going on. They'll just talk to you briefly.
Yeah.
And if they agree with the protocol that I laid out, then they will prescribe that.
That's epic, man. So people can get TRT, and I assume other stuff, Nandrolone too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Nandrolone, Exandrolone. We even have Stanozolol available. We do the GLP-1s too. So
okay.
Semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide is actually coming this month, I believe.
Okay, cool. All right, so it's more than just hormones. You got peptides too. That's a beautiful thing.
And we treat females too. Females need testosterone too. I have had amazing transformations with females, like dramatic, like as much as TRT helps men, I have seen testosterone help females to a greater degree.
Me too, man. I have this is just kind of a personal anecdotal, but there's a girl in my gym that, let's just call it, I facilitated getting on a very little bit of testosterone. And it's changed her life, dude. She doesn't have the injury that she had for a while. Her sex drive is higher. She feels great every day. It's a huge influence, dude.
Yeah. So we treat females, again, it's customized. If you need progesterone and estradiol, estriol as well, then we'll get you that. But we actually look at the blood work, see how you feel. And many of the premenopausal women just need testosterone.
Interesting.
Peri and postmenopausal women typically need all three.
Wow. That's a beautiful thing, man. Well, it's good that you have this out here for people, man. We got a couple primary clinics that we all trust. It's like Merrick Health, it's Defy Medical, it's TRT Nation. We didn't even really talk about this a whole lot, but this is ultimately where I found you, where you got a bunch of content on the web. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah, I do. We can, maybe in the description, we can put the link to my YouTube channel, but I have a YouTube channel. I have a Facebook group too. If people want to read, I even started to write a book called Memoirs of a Steroid Kingpin. I can certainly post the link to the book. It's on Amazon, Amazon Kindle Vela. They offer it. Memoirs of a Steroid Kingpin.
Yeah. I would love to read it, and I'm sure other folks would be interested.
It came out really good.
I bet it did. A lot of what we've talked about is like, how do you make yourself tolerate higher levels of testosterone? How do you make yourself tolerate higher levels of estrogen? How can you tolerate what ultimately may be a more therapeutic dose for you in optimizing all these health parameters? Is this why the low dose TRT evangelists exist? Because they're not really privy to all of this stuff? What's your take on that?
Yeah. So what I've found just from trying to fight this mentality and throughout Reddit and in other TRT forums too, what I've noticed is that people have a problem seeing outside their own self-centricity, right? Yeah. If you don't have a lot of experience and you only see what happens with you and a couple of your gym buddies or a couple of your buddies, you think that that's how everybody else should react, because this is how I reacted, so everybody else should react this way. And there's just not a full understanding of the massive disparity in genetic predispositions. And just when you see this 20,000 times, like I have, or like, you've seen it quite a bit too. When people get better at this, you stop referencing things in terms of, I do this. You start referencing things in percentages of people that you see, because you've seen it so many times. And it's not about me. It's not about how I react. It's about, what do most people, when we're talking about an aggregation of thousands and thousands of people, what do most people see when they do certain things? And so a lot of these low dose evangelists, there's a couple things. They regurgitate what they read from the Endocrine Society. They themselves can't tolerate high doses, so they think nobody else can either. And then there's a little inherent jealousy too of people who do 200 or more tend to look and feel a little better. And there's inherent jealousy of that. So they, in order to defend your position, you have to only do 100 milligrams per week because you can't tolerate anymore. To defend that, you tend to start forming a bias that people who do are out of line, and they don't need that, and they're doing it to have steroids and but it's just it's just simply not true. There's I was just doing this. I made a post on Reddit, and of course you get this guy. Nobody needs more than 100 milligrams. You got to be kidding.
Yeah.
You know how, more than half of my clients, of my patients, would not feel 100 milligrams, would feel no different than 100 milligrams per week.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Oh yeah. I like the idea that 200 is a cycle, that 200 is not a TRT dose, or that not many people are going to need more than 120. Again, you're right. I think you pinpointed what is really important for people to get in that, like, a lot of the low dose TRT evangelists, number one, haven't been able to get themselves to respond to higher doses. Okay, because they haven't done like the detailed work that needs to be done to, I don't know, maybe change the progesterone estradiol balance, maybe do some cardio to lower hematocrit. They haven't done the work to be able to tolerate those higher doses, but so that's important because they're out there pushing that 200 is a cycle, and that 120 is where you should be, and you should just lower your dose into oblivion. And it is important for people to understand that you don't have to feel suboptimal on TRT just so that you can control the metabolites. There's a whole other world of being able to manage those metabolites, or even tolerate those metabolites much better while being on higher levels of testosterone.
Yeah, and the fact is, it's just a fact that most people feel better on 200 milligrams or more. I mean, now, if you feel great on 100 milligrams per week, then great. Then do that and stay there, and that's great. But to not tolerate or understand the concept that most people actually won't even feel 100 milligrams per week is just it's just ignorant.
Totally. I've just as an attempt to reduce the like in the beginning of my TRT tenure, I used an Estradiol a lot, and in an attempt to take a drug holiday from that drug, I'd gone all the way down to 70 milligrams of test a week, and dude, I felt fucking terrible. Yeah. Like exactly, like pre-TRT, man, I was down at like 570 total tests. The estradiol was pretty low and whatever, but yeah, it's just if you can get yourself to tolerate higher levels of testosterone, you might find you'll have a much better experience on higher levels. Yeah. All right, Ryan. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for being with me. Let's do it again in the future.
Let's definitely do it again. I wanted to say thank you as well. All the content you put out you're helping thousands and thousands of people. It's really great content, and I know I've learned things from you, and thousands of people are, and you're helping. What we need in this country is to normalize this discussion about testosterone, and that's going to help. Even since I got out of prison, I've noticed a difference in the general education level of the people, and in the tolerance, and again, normalizing the discussion that, well, this actually might be a thing that is really beneficial to people and really helpful. And people like you help scenario, and you're helping posterity to help this more talked about, more normalized. And I appreciate it, and thousands of your viewers do as well.
I appreciate that, Ryan. That means a lot, bro. And you're right. Like it is, a lot of us are normalizing what ultimately is just going to help a lot of men be kind of like when you were, and a lot of us are when we get on TRT and start having higher levels of testosterone, when you convert to a less confident, just like a less aggressive, less assertive male, to what, we think about when we thought about males, like, I don't know, in the 1930s, 1940s, just like big, strong, formidable people that know how to get shit done. I mean, it's fucking life-changing, dude. So yeah, I appreciate the kind words, brother, man. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here. I'd love to have you on anytime you want to moving forward. Again, people can find Ryan at hormonesforme.com. We'll put Ryan's YouTube channel and Facebook groups down in the description of this video. Any last words, bro?
No, just thank you everybody for watching, and thanks for tuning into Ryan again, and just help normalize this discussion. Like one of the things that my clinic is going to take on as we get more of an audience is to work on descheduling testosterone and the rest of the anabolics. I think there's a lot of reasons for it, and I don't like to disparage the medical community, but they failed to properly handle this pervasive hormone deficiency that's just happening due to several reasons, right? And they've failed to adequately address that, and so therefore we need to take our health into our own hands. And so we have a plan. to work on, but we're going to need all the people because you need voters, you need the votes. Right. And
interesting.
And so yeah, just stick with Ryan, help normalize the discussion, help get the word out there that this is really helping a lot of people, and we'll work on helping deschedule it.
Dude, that's incredible. I didn't know you were doing that, and I'd love for you to keep me posted, and then I'll keep everybody else posted on it, man. That's incredible.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right, Ryan, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
You as well. Thanks, Ryan.
All right, man.